The Steinway grand piano stood like a silent sentinel in Robert Sterling's Manhattan penthouse, its polished surface reflecting the glittering chandeliers above. 200 of New York's elite had gathered for the annual Veterans Charity Gala, champagne flutes in hand, designer gowns swishing across marble floors. But nobody expected what was about to unfold when the tech billionaire stepped up to the microphone and made an announcement that would shatter every assumption in that room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling's voice boomed with the confidence of a man worth $3 billion. "I have a challenge. Play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 perfectly from start to finish, and I will personally donate $100,000 to the Veterans Recovery Fund, right here, right now." The crowd murmured. Chopin's first ballade, one of the most technically demanding pieces in classical piano literature. 12 minutes of pure virtuosity, the kind of piece that professional concert pianists spend years perfecting. Sterling smiled, scanning the room. "Any takers? Silence!" Then from the back of the room near the service entrance, a hand slowly raised. The crowd turned. And that's when everything changed. The man who raised his hand was wearing a gray janitor's uniform with Mitchell stitched across the chest pocket. James Mitchell. 47 years old, with silver threading through his close-cropped black hair, and eyes that had seen things most people in this room could never imagine. He had been emptying champagne glasses and replacing cocktail napkins for the past 3 hours, invisible to everyone who mattered. But now every eye was on him. Robert Sterling stood at the front of the room, his custom Tom Ford suit probably worth more than James earned in 6 months. At 52, Sterling had built his empire from nothing, or so the business magazines claimed. Tech Vision Industries, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, the kind of money that bought penthouses with Central Park views and invitations to exclusive galas. Next to him stood his son Dylan, 17 years old, and looking distinctly uncomfortable in his designer tuxedo. The boy had his father's sharp jawline, but softer eyes that were now fixed on the janitor with something that looked almost like hope. The room itself was a testament to excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. Modern art that probably cost more than most people's homes. And in the center of it all, that Steinway grand piano, worth $200,000 untouched and waiting. Sterling's challenge had been meant as theater entertainment for bored millionaires. Nobody actually expected someone to step forward, certainly not the help. James Mitchell had not always been a janitor. 41 years ago, in a small apartment in South Philadelphia, a 7-year-old boy sat at an old upright piano while his mother Dorothy Mitchell guided his small fingers across yellowed keys. She cleaned houses during the day, worked night shifts at a diner, but every evening at 6 o'clock, she sat with her son and taught him the language of music. "Music is freedom, baby," she would tell him, her voice warm and certain. "Nobody can take that from you. Not ever." Young James had a gift, not just talent, but something deeper. When his fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. Notes became emotions. Melodies became stories. By age 12, he was playing Rachmaninoff. By 14, Liszt. By 16, he had earned a full scholarship to the Juilliard School, the prestigious conservatory on the Upper West Side. The dream every young musician chases. James Mitchell was going to be a concert pianist. His mother cried tears of joy the day the acceptance letter arrived. But life has a way of changing plans. At 18, just months before his Juilliard classes were set to begin, Dorothy Mitchell collapsed while cleaning a lawyer's office in Center City. Brain aneurysm. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. James was suddenly alone with funeral expenses he couldn't afford and a scholarship he couldn't accept. Not when he needed to work to survive, to honor his mother's memory. So he enlisted. The army needed soldiers. They offered steady pay structure a path forward when everything else had crumbled. James Mitchell traded Juilliard for Fort Benning piano recitals, for rifle training Chopin for combat. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Infantry. Forward operating bases where dust got into everything and the heat made you question your sanity. But James found ways to hold on to music. There was an old keyboard in one of the rec rooms. Half the keys stuck, but James would play it after patrols. His unit would gather around battle-hardened soldiers listening to this kid from Philly play classical music on a broken keyboard in the middle of a war zone. It kept them human. It kept him sane. That's where he met Sarah Thompson, an army nurse from Oregon with red hair and freckles and a smile that could light up the darkest moments. She would sit and listen to James play, and somewhere between the Beethoven and the danger, they fell in love. They married 3 months after returning stateside. James took a job as a building maintenance technician, steady work with decent benefits. Sarah got her nursing degree, worked at a VA hospital. They bought a small house in Queens. And when their daughter Emma was born with Sarah's red hair and James's eyes, their world felt complete. Sarah loved when James played piano. They couldn't afford their own instrument, but sometimes they would sneak into a church after hours, and James would play, while Sarah held baby Emma swaying to the music. "You should perform again," Sarah would tell him. "You're too talented to give it up." But James was content. He had his family. He had steady work. Music was a private joy now, something he shared with the people he loved. And then, 6 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light on Queens Boulevard. Sarah was killed instantly. James Mitchell did not touch a piano for 6 years after that. The instrument that had been his voice, his freedom, his connection to everyone he'd lost became too painful to face. Every note would remind him of his mother's gentle teaching of playing for his fellow soldiers, of Sarah, swaying with their baby daughter. So he worked. He raised Emma alone. Single father, janitor, veteran. Invisible to people like Robert Sterling. Just another face in the machinery of the city, emptying trash cans and mopping floors. But the music never really left him. It lived in his fingers, in his muscle memory, in the quiet spaces of his heart. Waiting, James stood at the back of the glittering ballroom, his hand still raised, and felt every eye in the room upon him. The weight of their stares, the disbelief, the barely concealed amusement. He knew how this looked. A janitor in a gray uniform claiming he could play one of the most difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire. These people probably assumed he didn't know Chopin from Coldplay. For a moment, James considered lowering his hand, returning to his work, disappearing back into invisibility. It would be easier, safer. He had spent 6 years avoiding this exact situation, avoiding pianos, avoiding the memories they carried. But then he thought of Emma, his 12-year-old daughter, bright and curious, who wanted to go to the summer music program at Manhattan School of Music. $3,000 they didn't have. Emma had inherited her mother's smile and her father's gift for music. She played violin, and she was good, really good. The kind of good that deserved opportunities James couldn't afford to give her. $100,000 to the Veterans Recovery Fund. The fund that helped men and women like the soldiers he had served with the ones who came home broken and needed help putting the pieces back together. James thought of Tommy Rodriguez, who played guitar at their forward operating base and came home with PTSD so severe he couldn't hold down a job. Of Lisa Chen, a medic who saved 3 lives during an ambush and now lived in her car. Of Marcus Jones, who taught James how to field strip a rifle and died by suicide 2 years after his discharge. $100,000 could help people like them, could honor their service, could mean something. And all he had to do was play. James lowered his hand from the raised position and started walking toward the piano. The crowd parted silent now, watching this janitor in a gray uniform move through the sea of designer tuxedos and evening gowns. Robert Sterling stood by the piano, his expression shifting from amusement to incredulity. "Seriously," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "You can play Chopin's first ballade?" "Yes, sir," James replied quietly. Sterling's smile was not kind. "Do you even know how to read sheet music?" Someone in the crowd snickered. James heard whispered comments. "This is embarrassing. Someone should stop him. Sterling's going to humiliate him." "But Dylan..." Sterling stepped forward, his young face serious. "Dad," he said quietly, "maybe let him try." Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Let's see what happens. But I warn you," he said, looking at James, "this piece requires perfect technique. One mistake and the deal is off. No $100,000. Understand?" James nodded. He understood perfectly. This wasn't just about the music. It was about putting him in his place, reminding him and everyone else in this room about the natural order of things. Billionaires up here, janitors down there. That's how the world works. James reached the piano. The Steinway Grand. $200,000 worth of craftsmanship and precision. He had not sat at an instrument this fine since his Juilliard audition 29 years ago. He pulled out the bench, sat down. The room fell completely silent. His hands hovered over the keys. And for the first time in 6 years, James Mitchell prepared to play. Before James could place his fingers on the keys, Sterling's voice cut through the silence. "Wait, I think we should establish some ground rules here." The billionaire was smiling, but it was the kind of smile a predator gives before the kill. He gestured to the crowd, playing to his audience. "I mean, let's be realistic. We're talking about Chopin's Ballet No. 1 in G minor, Opus 23. Approximately 12 minutes of some of the most technically demanding piano composition ever written. We're talking double-thirds rapid octave passages, complex polyrhythms." Someone in the crowd laughed. Sterling continued warming to his theme. "This is the piece that Schumann called one of Chopin's wildest and most original creations. Professional pianists train for years to perform this piece. Concert pianists, people who've dedicated their entire lives to the instrument." He turned to James, his expression a mockery of concern. "So I just want to make sure you understand what you're claiming to be able to do. You're saying you, a building maintenance worker, can perform at the level of a professional concert pianist?" James met his eyes steadily. "I'm saying I can play the piece, sir. Have you played it before?" "Yes, sir. Many times." When was the last time James hesitated? 6 years ago. The crowd erupted in laughter. Someone actually said, "Oh my God, this is going to be a disaster." A woman in a sequined gown leaned over to her companion. "Why is Sterling allowing this? It's cruel." But Sterling was enjoying himself. James could see it in his eyes. This was entertainment, a janitor about to embarrass himself in front of New York's elite. A story Sterling would tell at future parties. "Remember that time a maintenance worker thought he could play Chopin 6 years?" Sterling repeated, savoring the words. So you haven't touched a piano in 6 years, but you think you can just sit down and play one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. From memory. Yes, sir. No sheet music. I don't need it. More laughter. Someone pulled out their phone, starting to record. This was going to go viral for all the wrong reasons. Dylan Sterling looked anguished. The teenager seemed to be the only person in the room who wasn't enjoying this spectacle. He whispered something to his father, but Sterling waved him off. "This I have to see," Sterling announced. "Please, by all means, go ahead." He gestured grandly to the piano. "The stage is yours." James turned back to the Steinway. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. Not from nerves about the playing. He knew he could play the piece. Muscle memory was a powerful thing. But from the memories that were already flooding back, triggered by the proximity to the keys. He could feel Sarah's presence, as if she were standing right behind him. He could hear his mother's voice. "Music is freedom, baby." He could see Tommy Rodriguez and Marcus Jones and Lisa Chen and all the others he'd played for in that dusty rec room in Afghanistan, soldiers seeking a moment of beauty in the midst of horror. James closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them, looked down at the keys, and placed his fingers in position. The room held its breath. And James began to play. The first notes of Chopin's ballade emerged soft and tentative, like a question being asked. James's fingers found the keys with a hesitation born not of uncertainty, but of reverence. This was a door he had kept locked for 6 years, and opening it meant facing everything on the other side. The introduction unfolded those distinctive opening bars that announce one of classical music's most profound works. James's touch was delicate, almost fragile, as if he were handling something precious that might break. But even in those first moments, something was different. The laughter in the room had stopped. The whispered comments fell away. Because even people who knew nothing about classical piano could hear that something unexpected was happening. These weren't the fumbling notes of an amateur. This was real playing, controlled, intentional, musical. As James continued through the opening section, his fingers remembering pathways they had traveled thousands of times before his mind was pulled backward through time. He was 7 years old again, in that cramped Philadelphia apartment, his mother sitting beside him on the piano bench. Her hands, rough from years of cleaning other people's homes, guided his small fingers across the keys. Feel the music, baby. Don't just play the notes. Feel what the composer wanted to say. He was 16 at his Juilliard audition, playing this exact piece in a small practice room, while 3 professors watched. The way their faces had changed from skepticism to attention to amazement. The scholarship letter that arrived 3 weeks later. His mother's tears of joy. He was 22 in that forward operating base in Helmand Province, playing a broken keyboard while dust drifted through the air and the distant sound of artillery rumbled like thunder. Tommy Rodriguez, sitting on an overturned crate, eyes closed, letting the music transport him somewhere beyond the war. Man Mitchell, when you play like that, I can almost remember what home feels like. He was 28 in a small church in Queens at midnight, playing while Sarah sat in the front pew holding baby Emma. The way Sarah had looked at him, love and pride mixing in her eyes. You have magic in your hands, James. Don't ever forget that. The memories came in waves, each one triggered by specific passages in the music. Chopin's first ballade is structured around contrasts, moments of gentle lyricism, giving way to explosive passion, quiet introspection, shattered by dramatic outbursts. It's music that tells a story, though what story depends on who's listening. For James tonight, It was the story of everything he'd lost and everything he'd survived. As he moved into the second theme, the più mosso section where the music becomes more agitated and questioning, James felt something shift inside him. His fingers were no longer tentative. The 6-year absence was falling away like a shed skin. Muscle memory is a remarkable thing. The human body remembers even when the mind tries to forget. His hands knew these patterns. His fingers understood the geometry of these chords. His arms remembered the weight and momentum needed for those powerful bass notes. All those hours of practice as a teenager, all those performances at Juilliard, all those late nights in Afghanistan, they hadn't disappeared. They had been waiting dormant for this moment. The piano itself seemed to respond. The Steinway was a magnificent instrument, perfectly maintained, its action responsive and precise. Every dynamic shade James intended came through clearly. Every subtle coloring of tone was possible. It was like switching from a cheap car to a Ferrari, every input producing exactly the desired result. James could feel the room's energy changing. The mockery had evaporated. Nobody was laughing now. Even without looking up from the keys, he could sense the shift in attention. People were actually listening. Robert Sterling stood frozen near the piano, his expression unreadable. The smug confidence had drained from his face. His son Dylan had moved closer, standing where he could see James's hands on the keys, his young face showing open wonder. The piece continued to unfold. Chopin's genius lies in his ability to create music that feels both inevitable and surprising, familiar and fresh. The ballade moves through multiple moods and modes, building toward moments of almost unbearable intensity before pulling back into reflection. James let himself sink into it. For the first time in 6 years, he wasn't running from the music. He was embracing it. And as he did, he felt Sarah's presence more strongly. Not painful now, but comforting. Like she was here listening, approving. This piece had been one of her favorites. She used to say it reminded her of a conversation between two people who loved each other, sometimes gentle, sometimes passionate, sometimes arguing, but always connected. Play it like you're talking to someone you love, she had told him once. Pour everything into it. Don't hold back. James hadn't been able to do that for 6 years. Holding back had been the only way to survive. But tonight, in front of 200 strangers who had expected him to fail, James Mitchell stopped holding back. The music began to build. Chopin's first ballade is structured like a narrative arc, starting with introduction and exploration building through conflict and complication, driving toward climax and resolution. James was approaching the development section now, where the thematic material becomes fragmented and turbulent, where Chopin pushes the pianist to their technical and expressive limits. His hands moved with increasing confidence across the keyboard. Complex passage work that would trip up many professional pianists flowed from his fingers with clarity and precision. The rapid scalar runs were clean and even. The thick chordal passages rang out with power but never harshness. But it wasn't just technical proficiency. That was the part that was making people in the audience lean forward in their seats, making them forget their champagne and their conversations and their preconceptions about janitors and class and who deserves to make music. James was playing with profound emotional depth. Every phrase was shaped with intention. Every dynamic marking was observed not as a rule, but as a means of communication. The quiet sections weren't just soft. They were introspective, questioning, tender. The loud sections weren't just forceful. They were passionate, urgent, desperate. The middle section of the ballade, marked agitato, is where Chopin's writing becomes almost orchestral in scope. The piano stops being a single instrument and starts becoming an entire ensemble. There are melodies in the treble counter-melodies, in the bass inner voices, creating harmonic richness, rhythmic complexity, creating forward momentum. James navigated all of it with the assurance of someone who had lived with this music for decades. His earlier hesitation was completely gone now. He was no longer a janitor who used to play piano. He was a pianist fully inhabiting the music channeling Chopin's voice through his own experience. In the audience, a woman who had laughed earlier now had tears streaming down her face. She didn't know why she was crying. She couldn't have named what she was feeling. But the music was reaching into her chest and squeezing her heart. An elderly man, a retired music professor who had come as someone's guest, stood transfixed. He had heard this piece performed hundreds of times by skilled professionals. But there was something about this performance, something raw and honest and profoundly moving that made it feel like he was hearing the music for the first time. Dylan Sterling had moved even closer, standing just a few feet from the piano, now watching James's hands with complete absorption. The teenager played piano himself, had taken lessons for years, though he had never shown particular passion for it. His father had insisted on the lessons as part of a well-rounded education, the way wealthy parents do. But watching James play Dylan suddenly understood what music could be. Not an obligation or a status symbol, but a language. A way of speaking truths too deep for words. And Robert Sterling, the man who had issued this challenge as a piece of entertainment, as a way to show off and amuse his guests, stood completely still. His arms hung at his sides. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like a man watching his entire understanding of the world shift beneath his feet. Because Sterling had grown up poor. This was a fact he rarely shared at gatherings like this, preferring to maintain the myth of the self-made tech genius who had built his empire through pure merit and intelligence. But the truth was more complicated. Robert Sterling had grown up in a small town in West Virginia, the son of a coal miner who had died of black lung disease when Robert was 12. His mother had worked as a janitor at the local high school to keep food on the table. Robert had watched her come home exhausted. Every night had seen the way people looked through her as if she didn't exist, had felt the burning shame of poverty in a country that equates worth with wealth. He had escaped through education and ruthless ambition, building his company through 90-hour work weeks and calculated risks. But somewhere in the climb from poverty to penthouse, he had forgotten his mother's lessons about dignity and respect. He had forgotten that the janitor has a story too. That the maintenance worker is a full human being with dreams and talents and losses and loves. And now standing in his multi-million-dollar apartment listening to his janitor play Chopin, with the skill and sensitivity of a master, Robert Sterling was being forced to remember. The music swirled and crashed around the room. James had reached the Presto con fuoco section, the part marked fast with fire, where Chopin unleashes the full fury of the piano. This is where many pianists break down, where the technical demands overwhelm the musical intention, where it becomes just noise and show. But James played it with control and passion in perfect balance. The fire was there, yes, but it was purposeful fire. He wasn't showing off. He was expressing something. Grief, rage, loss, love, survival. All of it poured into these cascading notes and thundering chords. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of it. People had stopped pretending to look casual. Everyone was openly staring now, mesmerized, some with tears on their faces, others with expressions of shock and awe. And then, as the piece approached its final climax, James did something unexpected. He began to personalize the interpretation. Classical musicians debate this endlessly. How much freedom does the performer have to alter the composer's intentions? Where is the line between interpretation and violation? Chopin left many sections of his music relatively unmarked, trusting the performer's musical intelligence. But he also had specific intentions about tempo and dynamics and phrasing. What James did was subtle, but unmistakable to anyone who knew the piece well. In the final section, where the ballad reaches its emotional and technical peak, James began to shape the phrases in a way that felt like tribute, like prayer, like goodbye. He slowed the tempo just slightly, giving each phrase more weight, more space. He brought out inner voices in the harmony that are usually submerged, creating a richer, more complex texture. And in the final cascade of notes leading to the last decisive chords he played, with a combination of power and tenderness that suggested not ending, but transformation. The retired music professor recognized what James was doing. He was playing this the way Arthur Rubinstein used to play it, the legendary pianist, who had said that every performance should be a unique experience, that the music should reflect where the performer is in their life at that moment. James was not just playing Chopin's first ballade. He was playing his life story, his mother's love, his lost dream of Juilliard, the war, his soldiers, Sarah, Emma. 6 years of silence. And this moment, this impossible moment where all of it came together. The final section of the ballade approached. This is where Chopin brings all the thematic material together in a stunning conclusion. The motifs from earlier return transformed and intensified. The music that was once questioning becomes declarative. The passages that were once tentative become certain. James's entire body was engaged now. His shoulders moved with the phrasing. His torso swayed with the rhythmic pulse. His face showed the emotional content of every phrase, joy and sorrow and determination all flickering across his features. This was not the invisible janitor anymore. This was an artist fully alive in his medium, commanding the room not through authority or wealth or status, but through the oldest form of human power, the ability to make others feel. The music built and built, climbing toward the final climax. The technical demands were extreme here. Rapid octaves in both hands, wide leaps, dense chords that require complete control of finger strength and arm weight. James navigated all of it with a certainty that spoke of thousands of hours of practice of muscle memory so deep it had survived 6 years of dormancy. And then he reached the last page, the final push to the conclusion. Chopin marks this section fortissimo, con forza loud and with force. But within that fortissimo, there are subtle dynamics, moments of slight pulling back before the final surge forward. James played these measures like a man running toward something precious, stumbling, but never falling, desperate, but not defeated. The piano sang and thundered under his hands. In the audience, people were openly weeping. The woman in the sequined gown who had called this spectacle cruel was crying so hard her mascara ran. The elderly music professor had closed his eyes, his lips moving in what might have been prayer. Dylan Sterling's face was flushed, his eyes shining with something between excitement and revelation. And Robert Sterling, the billionaire who had started this evening so confident in his worldview, so certain of his place in the natural hierarchy of things, felt something crack open inside his chest. He was seeing his mother. Mary Sterling, who had cleaned the high school bathrooms and classrooms for 23 years, who had come home every evening with her back aching and her hands red and raw from chemicals, but who had always asked Robert about his homework, who had always believed he could be more than their small town expected. She had died 10 years ago, just before tech vision really took off, just before Robert became the kind of rich that insulates you from ever remembering what poor felt like. He had bought her a house before she died, had made sure she was comfortable, but he had never really honored what she had given him. The understanding that your work does not define your worth. That dignity is inherent, not earned. That the janitor might be a genius. That the invisible person might be extraordinary. James Mitchell, in his gray uniform, with Mitchell stitched on the pocket, was teaching Robert Sterling the lesson his mother had tried to teach him all along. The music reached the final chords. Chopin ends the ballade with a series of massive declarative statements descending chromatically, each chord arriving with the weight of inevitability. These are some of the most satisfying chords in all of classical music, the sense of arrival complete and total. James played them with everything he had left. His whole body rose slightly off the bench, with each chord the physical effort of producing that much sound from the instrument visible and visceral. But even in these final, powerful moments, there was control. The chords were not just loud, they were resonant. They rang through this room with clarity and purpose. The penultimate chord, a massive, complex harmony that needs to hang in the air for just the right amount of time, not too long, not too short, before the final resolution. James held it. The sound filled every corner of the vast room, bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows, vibrating in the crystal chandeliers, reverberating in the chests of 200 people who had not expected to be moved tonight. And then the final chord, G minor tonic octaves in both hands, the bottom note the lowest G on the keyboard, the top note the highest G James could reach with his right hand. The entire range of the piano compressed into one triumphant, tragic, beautiful statement. James brought his hands down with controlled force. The chord exploded into the room, and then, following Chopin's marking, he lifted his hands immediately off the keys, letting the sound sustain naturally, the dampers lifted by the pedal, the strings vibrating freely. The sound hung in the air, fading slowly, a long decay that felt like a prayer dissolving into silence. James sat perfectly still, his hands hovering above the keyboard, his eyes closed, his breath coming in deep pulls. The room was absolutely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of the beginning when people were waiting to laugh. This was different. This was the silence of people who had just witnessed something they could not immediately process. The silence of the sacred. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. James remained motionless, his hands still suspended above the keys, returning slowly from wherever the music had taken him. And then Robert Sterling began to clap. It wasn't the polite golf clap of obligatory applause. It was real, slow and steady and genuine. His hands coming together with force, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Dylan joined his father. Then the woman in the sequined gown. Then the retired music professor. Then everyone all at once, the entire room erupting into applause that was part appreciation, part relief, part apology. People stood. The applause grew louder. Some people were cheering. The woman who had been crying was still crying, but now she was also standing and clapping so hard her hands were red. James finally opened his eyes. He lowered his hands to his lap. He turned on the bench to face the audience. and the expression on his face was complicated. Not triumph, exactly. Not vindication, though that was part of it. Something deeper. The look of a man who had just reconnected with a part of himself he thought was lost forever. The applause continued for a full minute. Standing ovation. 200 of New York's elite, acknowledging with their hands and their feet and their voices that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. And at the center of it all stood Robert Sterling, clapping harder than anyone, tears streaming down his face, a billionaire crying for reasons he was only beginning to understand. The applause finally began to fade. People sat down slowly, reluctantly, still processing what they had just witnessed. The room buzzed with energy, everyone turning to their neighbors trying to find words for the experience. James stood up from the piano bench, his legs slightly unsteady. 6 years since he had played a complete piece. 6 years since he had allowed himself to fully enter the world of music. His body was trembling slightly, adrenaline and emotion mixing in his bloodstream. He turned to face Robert Sterling. The billionaire stood there, his custom Tom Ford suit perfect and his face completely transformed. The arrogance was gone. The casual superiority had vanished. What remained was something raw and honest and almost childlike. Sterling's eyes were red-rimmed from tears he had not bothered to hide. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The room watched the energy taut with anticipation. What happens now? How does this resolve? Sterling took a step forward, then another. He walked right up to James, and before anyone knew what was happening, the billionaire extended his hand. Not a handshake of business, not the grip of transaction. Sterling reached out with both hands and took James's right hand, the hand that had just played Chopin, and held it gently, carefully, as if it were something precious. "I am so sorry," Sterling said, his voice thick with emotion. The room was so quiet that everyone heard him clearly. "I am so deeply sorry." James looked at this man, this stranger who had mocked him minutes ago, who had set up this entire situation as entertainment, and saw something he recognized. Regret. Shame. The painful realization of one's own smallness. "It's okay," James said quietly. "No." Sterling shook his head vigorously. "It's not okay. What I did, the way I spoke to you, the assumptions I made, none of that is okay." He released James's hand and turned to address the room, his voice growing stronger. "I need to say something to everyone here. What we just witnessed is not just an extraordinary musical performance. It's a lesson I needed to learn." The crowd was completely attentive now. This was not the Robert Sterling they knew, the confident deal-maker, the ruthless CEO. This was someone else, someone more honest. "I grew up poor," Sterling said, and several people in the room looked surprised. This was not part of his usual narrative. "My father died when I was 12. My mother worked as a janitor to keep us fed. She cleaned the high school I attended. I watched her empty trash cans and scrub toilets while my classmates walked past her like she didn't exist." His voice cracked slightly. "She taught me that every person has value, that your job doesn't define your worth, that dignity is not something you earn, it's something you possess simply by being human. She taught me that lesson every single day." He turned back to James. "And somewhere along the way, I forgot it. I became the kind of person who looks through the janitor, who assumes that status equals value, who thinks that because I can afford a $200,000 piano, I have the right to humiliate the man who cleans my building." The room was absolutely silent. People looked uncomfortable. This was hitting too close to home for many of them. James Sterling said, "I don't even know your last name." You've worked in this building for how long? 5 years, sir. 5 years. And I never asked you about your life. Never wondered who you were beyond your uniform. That's on me. That's my failure." Dylan Sterling stepped forward, standing beside his father. The teenager's face showed a complex mix of emotions: pride in his father's honesty, shame at having witnessed the earlier mockery, and something else: admiration for James. "That was incredible," Dylan said to James, his voice earnest. "I've been taking piano lessons since I was 6, and I've never heard anyone play like that." "Where did you learn?" James hesitated, then answered. "I was supposed to go to Juilliard, long time ago." "What happened?" Someone in the crowd called out, and James realized he was standing in front of 200 people, all of them looking at him with genuine interest for the first time tonight. Not at the janitor, at the person, at James Mitchell, human being with a story. "Life happened," James said simply. "My mother died. I enlisted in the army, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, got married, had a daughter." He paused, his voice dropping. "Lost my wife 6 years ago. Haven't played piano since then. Until tonight." The room absorbed this information. A veteran, a widower, a single father. Suddenly, the gray uniform meant something different. Suddenly, this wasn't just about music. "What's your daughter's name?" a woman asked gently. "Emma. She's 12. She plays violin." "Is she good?" Dylan asked. James smiled a real smile. "She's great. She has a gift. She wants to go to summer music program at Manhattan School of Music, but I can't afford it." Robert Sterling made a decision in that moment. "I'm going to write 2 checks tonight. $100,000 to the Veterans Recovery Fund as promised, and $50,000 for your daughter's education. Music lessons, summer programs, whatever she needs." The crowd began to applaud, but Sterling held up his hand. "Wait, I'm not done. James, I want to offer you a job, not as a janitor. I mean, you can keep that job if you want it. The pay is steady and the benefits are good. But I also want to hire you as the musical director for Tech Vision's new Veterans program." James looked confused. "Veterans program?" "We've been developing a program to help veterans transition to civilian careers, particularly in tech. But I realize now we've been thinking about it all wrong. We've been focused on job training, which is important. But what veterans need is holistic support, mental health resources, community, creative outlets, music therapy." Sterling's eyes were bright with the excitement of a new idea. "You could run that part of the program, teach piano to veterans who want to learn, create music groups, use your gifts to help others the way music helped you during your service." James stood frozen, trying to process this rapid shift in fortune. 20 minutes ago, he had been invisible. Now he was being offered opportunities he had never imagined. "I don't know what to say," he managed. "Say you'll think about it," Sterling replied. "We'll talk details later, but right now I want to make sure you get home to your daughter and tell her that her father is one of the most talented pianists I've ever heard." The crowd applauded again, and this time Sterling let them. But James's mind was reeling, not just from the job offer or the money, though those were significant, but from what had just happened inside him while he played. For 6 years, he had locked away a part of himself, the part that was an artist, the part that needed music the way lungs need air. He had done it as a survival mechanism because the pain of playing without Sarah was too much to bear. But tonight, he had discovered something. The pain was still there. It would always be there. But so was the beauty. So was the connection. So was the part of himself that Sarah had loved. Music hadn't betrayed him. It had waited for him. And when he finally returned to it, it welcomed him back. Robert Sterling gestured for the room's attention. The crowd, still buzzing with emotion and conversation, gradually fell silent. The billionaire's face held an expression people had rarely seen before, vulnerability mixed with determination. "There's something else I need to share," Sterling said. "A confession, actually." He walked over to a side table and picked up a framed photograph. It showed a woman in her 60s wearing a simple dress and a gentle smile. He held it up for the room to see. "This is my mother, Mary Sterling. She died 10 years ago. As I mentioned, she worked as a janitor for 23 years. But what I didn't tell you is that she had a saying. She'd say it to me whenever I got too big for my britches, whenever I started judging people by their circumstances rather than their character." Sterling's voice grew quiet, reflective. She would say, "Bobby the janitor might be a genius. The maid might be a poet. The person you look through might be the person you need to look up to. Stay humble." He set the photograph down carefully. "I built this company after she died, made my first billion 2 years after her funeral, and somewhere in all that success, I forgot her words. I forgot that the woman who raised me, who taught me everything that matters, spent her life doing work that people like me, people in this room, consider beneath notice." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This was getting too real, too personal. But Sterling wasn't done. "Tonight I challenged someone to play piano as a form of entertainment. As a power move, really. I never expected anyone to accept. And when James stepped forward, I saw an opportunity to amuse my guests, to put someone in their place, to remind everyone about the natural order of things." He turned to face James directly. "But you know what the really shameful part is? Even after you started playing, even after it became clear that you had real skill, there was a part of me that resented it. A part of me that didn't want you to be that good. Because if you're extraordinary, then what does that make me? Just another rich guy who can afford things but can't actually do things." Dylan Sterling was watching his father with an expression of surprise and respect. He had never heard his father talk like this, so openly about his own flaws and fears. "My mother used to play piano." Sterling continued, his voice thick with memory. "Not well. She never had lessons. But she had an old upright in our house, and sometimes in the evenings after her shift cleaning the school, she would sit down and pick out simple melodies. Hymns, mostly. She said it reminded her that there was more to life than mops and buckets." He looked around the room. "How many of you noticed who cleaned this apartment tonight? Who vacuumed these floors? Who polished this piano? Who prepared the service area show of hands? Who knows the names of the people who made this evening possible?" Silence. People looked at their feet, at their drinks, anywhere but at Sterling. No one raised their hand. Exactly. We live in a world where we've decided that certain people matter and certain people don't. Where we've confused wealth with worth. Where we look through the people who serve us as if they're not fully human. A woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice shaky. "Robert, this is making us all very uncomfortable." Good Sterling replied without hesitation. "It should be uncomfortable. Because we should be ashamed. I should be ashamed. And James," he turned back to the man in the gray uniform, "you had every right to let me make a fool of myself. To walk away from my challenge and let me stand here exposed as the arrogant jackass I was being. But instead you played. You shared your gift. You showed grace when I showed contempt." Why James was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Finally he spoke. "When I was in Afghanistan, there was this saying we had in our unit. Mission first, but people always. It meant that we did what we had to do, we completed our objectives, but we never forgot that everyone in the mix was a person. Enemy combatants were people. Local civilians were people. The brass giving us orders were people. The janitors at our base were people. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. There was this old Afghan man who cleaned our latrines. Probably 70 years old, barely spoke English. Most of the guys ignored him, but I would nod to him, say hello. One day he waited until everyone else was gone, and he told me through broken English and hand gestures that he used to be a university professor. Literature. But the Taliban burned his school, killed his colleagues, so he survived by taking whatever work he could find. The room was completely absorbed in the story. He told me he did the work with dignity because the work itself doesn't define the man. The man defines the work. You can clean a latrine like a slave, or you can clean it like a craftsman. The choice is yours. James's voice grew stronger. So when you challenged me tonight, Mr. Sterling, I didn't play to prove anything to you. I didn't play to make you feel small or to embarrass you. I played because my daughter needs opportunities I can't give her. I played because that $100,000 could help veterans who served with me, men and women who came home broken and need help. And I played because music is what I am, regardless of what I do for work. He looked around the room. I'm a janitor because it pays the bills and provides health insurance for my daughter. But I'm a father, a veteran, a pianist, a man who loved his wife and still grieves her. The uniform doesn't erase those things. It never could. The retired music professor in the audience stood up. His voice was respectful, but firm. Young man, I taught at Juilliard for 37 years. I've heard thousands of performances of Chopin's First Ballad. What you played tonight was extraordinary. Not just technically proficient, which it absolutely was, but emotionally profound. You didn't just play Chopin's notes. You played your life through Chopin's structure. That's what the greatest artists do. He turned to address the room. Real artistry isn't about credentials or career paths. It's about having something to say and the skill to say it. This man has both. The fact that he empties our trash cans is irrelevant to his artistic worth. Frankly, it should be irrelevant to his human worth as well. Applause broke out again, scattered but genuine. People were beginning to understand, or at least beginning to feel uncomfortable with their previous understanding. Robert Sterling walked over to James and placed a hand on his shoulder. I meant what I said about the job offer. But more than that, I want to thank you. Tonight you gave my son something I've been failing to give him for years. You showed him what it means to have integrity, to be humble, to value people over status. Dylan nodded vigorously. Would you consider giving me piano lessons? The teenager asked James. Real lessons, not the kind where some teacher just makes me play scales. Lessons where I learn what music actually means. James looked at this 17-year-old boy, this child of privilege, who was genuinely asking to learn from a janitor, and felt something warm bloom in his chest. I'd be honored, he said simply. James took a breath, knowing that if he was going to explain himself fully, he needed to share the whole story. The room was still silent, waiting, and he realized they were genuinely interested in hearing more. My wife, Sarah, died 6 years ago this month. James began, his voice steady but quiet. Drunk driver. She was coming home from her shift at the VA hospital where she worked as a nurse. Emma was 6 years old enough to understand that mommy wasn't coming home, but too young to understand why. He walked back to the piano, his hand resting on the polished wood. Sarah loved music. She's the one who convinced me that even though I couldn't be a professional pianist, I shouldn't stop playing. She said music was too important to abandon just because the career path didn't work out. James's fingers traced the edge of the keyboard. We couldn't afford our own piano, so we would sneak into St. Mary's Church after hours. The priest knew we were doing it and never said anything. I would play, and Sarah would sit in the front pew with Emma, And for those hours, we were the richest people in the world. Several people in the audience were crying now, including the woman in the sequined gown who had earlier called the spectacle cruel. She understood now that she had witnessed something she couldn't have imagined, not humiliation, but resurrection. After Sarah died, I couldn't play anymore. Every time I sat at a piano, all I could think about was her. Her smile when I played her favorite pieces, her laugh when I messed up, the way she would cry during particularly beautiful passages. It hurt too much, so I just stopped. He turned to face the audience. I've been a janitor here for 5 years. Steady pay, good benefits, health insurance for Emma. Mr. Sterling has always been fair to me as an employer. I have no complaints about the work. It's honest work, and there's dignity in it. But tonight, when I heard about the challenge and the $100,000, something clicked in my mind. That money could help so many people. Veterans who came home damaged and need support. My daughter who has her mother's sensitivity and her own musical gift. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from the pain and remember what the music also represents. Joy, connection, life. Robert Sterling was nodding his face, showing understanding. How did you handle it? He asked gently. Playing again after 6 years. James smiled a small, sad smile. Honestly, the first few measures were terrifying. My hands were shaking. I thought I might have forgotten everything. But then something remarkable happened. My body remembered. My fingers knew where to go. And I realized that Sarah isn't in the pain of her absence. She's in the music. She's in every beautiful thing I encounter. She's in Emma's laugh, and in the way morning light comes through our apartment window, and in these notes that Chopin wrote 200 years ago. He looked at the Steinway, this magnificent instrument. When I played tonight, I wasn't playing alone. My mother was there teaching me as she did when I was 7. My fellow soldiers were there listening the way they used to in Afghanistan. And Sarah was there, swaying with the music, proud of me for finally finding my way back. Dylan Sterling spoke up, his young voice full of emotion. That's why it sounded the way it did. You weren't just playing notes. You were playing memories. You were playing love. Yes, James agreed. That's exactly right. The retired music professor stood again. There's a concept in musical interpretation called lived experience. The idea that a performer brings their life story to the music, that their joys and sorrows inform the way they shape phrases and dynamics. Young pianists can play all the right notes, but they often lack depth because they haven't lived enough yet. What we heard tonight was the sound of a life fully lived. Triumph and tragedy, hope and heartbreak. That's what made it transcendent. A woman in the audience raised her hand tentatively. Can I ask a question? Why did you change the ending slightly? The tempo pulled back more than usual. Was that intentional? James was surprised she had noticed. Yes. I played it the way my wife loved it. She always said the ending should feel like a farewell, not an ending. Like saying goodbye to someone you love, knowing you'll meet them again. So I took it slower, gave it more space, made it a goodbye. The room sat with that for a moment. The idea that this janitor, this veteran, this widower, had taken one of classical music's masterpieces and personalized it as a tribute to his lost wife was almost too beautiful to bear. Robert Sterling's voice was rough when he spoke. James, I want to revise my earlier offer. $50,000 for Emma's education isn't enough. I want to establish a full scholarship fund in Sarah's name. For children of veterans who show musical aptitude, Emma will be the first recipient, but it won't be the last. Your wife spent her life helping veterans at the VA hospital. This feels like the right way to honor that. James felt his throat tighten. That's very generous, sir. It's not generous. It's just... And please stop calling me sir. My name is Robert." The two men looked at each other across the social divide that had separated them just an hour ago. That divide was still there in many ways. Sterling would go to bed in his penthouse while James went home to his modest apartment in Queens. Sterling's wealth and privilege were not erased by one moment of clarity, but something had shifted. A recognition had occurred, a seeing of each other as full humans, complex and worthy and deserving of respect. "There's one more thing," Sterling said. "I'd like to record you playing, professionally. We could release it, maybe use the proceeds for the Veterans Music Therapy program. Would you be willing?" James hesitated. The idea of being a public figure, of having his performance shared beyond this room was daunting. But he thought of Tommy Rodriguez and Lisa Chen and Marcus Jones and all the others who could benefit from such a program. If it helps veterans, yes. "I'll do it." The applause this time was different, not for the performance, but for the man, for his integrity, for his willingness to use his gifts in service of others, for the quiet dignity he had maintained throughout an evening that started with mockery and ended with honor. Dylan Sterling approached James with his phone. "I recorded the whole thing, not to post it just for myself, to remember. Is that okay?" James nodded. "It's okay." "Can I tell you something?" the teenager asked. "I've been learning piano since I was 6. My dad pays for the best teachers, but I've hated it. It was just another thing I had to do, another box to check. But watching you play tonight, hearing the story behind it, I get it now. Music isn't about perfect technique or following rules. It's about having something to say." James smiled at this young man, who was on the cusp of understanding something important. That's exactly right. Technique is just the vocabulary, but you need to have something to say with that vocabulary. And the only way to have something to say is to live, to love people, to experience joy and pain, to be fully human. "Will you teach me that?" Dylan asked earnestly. "I'll try," James replied. "But the real teaching comes from life, not from lessons. I can show you the techniques. Life will teach you the meaning." The party that had started as a display of wealth and status had transformed into something else entirely. Small groups formed around the room, people talking quietly, many of them reflecting on their own assumptions and prejudices. The champagne still flowed, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a thoughtfulness now, a gravity. Several guests approached James to shake his hand, to thank him for the performance, to share their own stories of hidden talents or abandoned dreams. A hedge fund manager admitted he used to paint and hadn't picked up a brush in 15 years. A real estate developer mentioned that she had written poetry in college, but stopped when everyone told her it wasn't practical. A tech entrepreneur confessed that he played guitar, but only in his apartment alone, too afraid of judgment to share it with others. James listened to each of them, recognizing in their stories the same thing he had experienced. The pressure to be practical, to prioritize financial security over artistic expression, to hide the parts of themselves that didn't fit into expected narratives of success. "It's never too late," he told them. I just proved that. 6 years away from the piano, and my hands still remembered. Your gifts don't disappear just because you ignore them. They wait. The woman in the sequined gown, whose name turned out to be Patricia, approached with genuine humility. "I laughed when you first stepped forward. I want to apologize for that. It was cruel and thoughtless." James shook his head. "You didn't know. None of you did. How could you? I'm the janitor. You had no reason to expect anything else." "That's the problem, though, isn't it?" Patricia said. "We should expect more. We should assume that everyone we meet has depths we can't see, talents we can't imagine, stories that would break our hearts or inspire our souls. We should live that way. She pulled out her phone and made a note. I'm on the board of 3 different companies. I'm going to propose that we start a program to highlight the talents and stories of our service employees. Not in a patronizing way, but genuinely. Maybe quarterly showcases where people can share their art or music or writing. Pay them for their time. Celebrate them. James smiled. That would be wonderful. There's a woman who cleans the 14th floor. Rosa. She writes poetry in Spanish. Beautiful stuff. She's shown me some of it. Would she be willing to share it? Patricia asked. I think so. If it was done respectfully, not like a circus. Respectfully, Patricia agreed. I promise. Across the room, Robert Sterling was in deep conversation with his son. Dylan was animated, gesturing as he spoke, and Sterling was listening with full attention, not the distracted half-presence he usually gave his teenage son. I want to understand, Dylan was saying, how you grew up, what Grandma's life was like. You never talk about it. Sterling sighed. I was ashamed, I think. Ashamed of where I came from. Afraid that if people knew I was the son of a janitor, they wouldn't take me seriously in business. So I just edited that part out, created a myth of the self-made man. But you were self-made, Dylan protested. You built the company. You earned your success. Yes and no. Sterling replied. I worked hard, that's true. But I also had help. Teachers who believed in me. A guidance counselor who helped me apply to college. A first boss who gave me a chance when I had no experience. Investors who took a risk on a kid from West Virginia with big ideas. And most of all, a mother who sacrificed everything to give me opportunities she never had. He looked at James across the room. That man worked just as hard as I did, probably harder, served his country, raised a daughter alone, maintained his integrity and his gifts in the face of loss that would break most people. The only difference between us is luck, circumstance, the accidents of birth and opportunity. Dylan absorbed this. So what do we do with that understanding? We use what we have to help others. We stay humble. We remember that the janitor might be a genius, just like Grandma always said. And we teach our children to see people really see them, not just their uniforms or their roles. Father and son stood together, and Sterling put his arm around Dylan's shoulders. It was a gesture of affection that had become rare as Dylan grew older and Sterling grew busier. But tonight, something had cracked open between them. A honesty, a recognition of what matters. The retired music professor approached James with a business card. I'm no longer at Juilliard, but I still have connections there. If your daughter Emma is as talented as you suggest, I'd like to arrange an audition. They have excellent scholarship programs for promising young musicians. James took the card with trembling hands. Juilliard. The dream he had given up 29 years ago, now being offered to his daughter. She plays violin, not piano. Is that okay? They have an exceptional strings program, one of the best in the world. Give me your contact information. I'll make some calls. As James wrote down his phone number and email, he felt a wave of emotion that almost knocked him over. This morning he had woken up as James Mitchell Janitor, single father, anonymous. Tonight he was going home as James Mitchell, pianist, veteran man, whose daughter might have a chance at one of the world's finest music schools. Not because he had won some competition or earned some credential, but because he had said yes. Because when the challenge came, he had raised his hand. Because he had been willing to be seen. The party began to wind down. Guests started leaving, but each one stopped to speak with James before they left. Handshakes, sometimes hugs, words of appreciation and respect. Several people pressed business cards into his hand, offers of help, connections, opportunities. Robert Sterling announced that he would donate an additional $50,000 to the Veterans Recovery Fund that night, above and beyond the 100,000 from the challenge. Other guests, inspired or shamed, or both, began pledging donations as well. By the time the last guest left, nearly $400,000 had been raised for veterans programs. "You did this," Sterling told James. "Your performance, your story, it opened people's hearts and wallets." "We did it together," James replied. "You gave me the platform. I just played some notes. Don't diminish what happened here tonight. You changed people. I know you changed me." As the last guests filtered out and the catering staff began cleaning up, James prepared to leave as well. He needed to get home to Emma to tell her everything that had happened, to share the incredible turn his life had just taken. But before he left, Robert Sterling asked him to stay for a few more minutes. They sat together in the now quiet penthouse, just the two of them, and Dylan, the vast space echoing with the ghosts of the evening's events. "I want to understand something," Sterling said. "When I mocked you earlier when I was being cruel, you stayed calm. You didn't get angry or defensive." Why James thought about the question. I've been on the other end of enough contempt to recognize what it is. Usually when people treat others badly, it's because they're afraid of something. They're protecting something. I figured you had your reasons. But you didn't know about my mother, about my background. Didn't need to. Pain recognizes pain. Fear recognizes fear. You were defending something you'd built, and maybe worrying that it wasn't as solid as you wanted everyone to think. That's just human nature. Sterling shook his head in wonder. "You're a better man than I am. I'm just a man who's learned some things. War teaches you about ego real fast. When people are shooting at you, your fancy credentials don't matter. Your bank account is meaningless. All that matters is whether you can do your job and trust your team. It gives you perspective." "I've never served," Sterling admitted. "I've never really risked anything except money. And money is easy to risk when you have enough of it." "You're risking something now," James pointed out. "You're risking your image, your reputation as the tough CEO. You cried in front of 200 people tonight. You admitted you were wrong. That takes courage." Dylan spoke up. "I've never seen my dad cry before tonight." Sterling looked at his son, surprised. "Never? Not once. Not even when Grandma died." The billionaire absorbed this. "I didn't know how," he said, quietly. "My father died when I was 12. After that, my mother needed me to be strong, so I learned to push everything down, to be tough, to never show weakness. That's how I built the company too. Never let them see you sweat. Never admit vulnerability. Always project confidence." He looked at James. "But you showed me that there's a different kind of strength. The strength to be vulnerable, to share your pain and your art and your authentic self, even when people are ready to mock you for it." James nodded. "My unit commander in Afghanistan used to say that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what matters despite the fear." Tonight I was terrified. Terrified I'd forgotten how to play. Terrified I'd embarrass myself. Terrified the memories would be too painful. But I played anyway because the cause was worth the risk. "The Veterans Fund," Sterling said. "And Emma. And honestly, for me too. I needed to know if I could still do it, if that part of me was still alive." "And is it?" Dylan asked. James smiled. "Yes, very much so. It was just sleeping. Healing, maybe. But it's awake now." Sterling stood up and walked to the piano. He ran his hand over the polished surface. "This instrument costs $200,000. I bought it because it looked impressive. A status symbol, really. I can't play it. I never learned. It's basically very expensive furniture." He turned to James. "Would you be willing to come here occasionally? Play it. Teach Dylan. Give this beautiful instrument a purpose beyond decoration. You want me to give lessons here. I want you to bring music into this space. Make it alive. And not just for Dylan. I have other employees in the building. Maybe some of them have talents they've been hiding. Maybe we could start something. A music program for anyone who works here and wants to learn or share their art. James felt the idea taking shape. Like a community program. Exactly. Use this space, this piano, these resources for something meaningful. You'd be perfect to run it. And I'd pay you properly, not janitor wages. A real salary for being our director of music and community programs. I'd still need to keep my day job, James said practically, for the health insurance and stability. What if the new job came with better health insurance and a higher salary? What if I made it worth your while to transition? James looked at this man, this billionaire who 12 hours ago he had known only as a distant boss, occasionally seen in elevators or hallways. Now Sterling was offering him a chance to build something meaningful, to use his gifts in service of a community, to honor music and the people who make it. I'd need to think about it, James said. Talk to Emma. Make sure it's the right move for us. But I'm interested. Very interested. Take all the time you need, Sterling replied. The offer stands. No pressure. Dylan looked at both men. This feels like something important is happening. Like bigger than just a job or a performance. Like the universe is rearranging itself. James laughed. That's a very poetic way of putting it. I'm feeling poetic tonight, Dylan said with a grin. You inspired me. Sterling put his hand on his son's shoulder. You inspired all of us. That's what real art does. It doesn't just entertain, it transforms. It reveals truth. It connects us to our humanity. He looked at James with profound respect. Thank you for that gift. Thank you for saying yes when you could have said no. Thank you for trusting us with your story and your talent. And thank you for reminding me what my mother tried to teach me all along. That dignity is inherent, not earned. That every person deserves to be seen. James stood up, preparing to finally leave. I need to get home to my daughter. She's probably wondering why I'm so late. Give her our best, Sterling said. And tell her that her father is an extraordinary man. Tell her we're honored to know him. As James walked to the door, he paused and looked back at the Steinway grand piano, illuminated by the soft light of the chandeliers. 6 years ago, he had walked away from music, believing it was the only way to survive his grief. Tonight he had learned that grief and beauty can coexist. That pain doesn't erase joy, it deepens it. That the things we love never truly leave us. They just transform, waiting for us to be ready to embrace them again. He had come to this penthouse as a janitor and was leaving as an artist. But more than that, he was leaving as a man who had faced his fears and discovered that on the other side of fear was not disaster, but possibility. Not an ending, but a beginning. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, James Mitchell stood in a completely different space. Not a penthouse ballroom, but a community center in the Bronx filled with veterans of all ages, sitting at various instruments or standing near microphones. This was the Veterans Creative Arts Program, funded by Robert Sterling's foundation and directed by James. They met twice a week, offering free music lessons, art classes, and creative writing workshops to any veteran who wanted to participate. Tommy Rodriguez was here, the same soldier who had listened to James play in Afghanistan. He was learning guitar, his hands still sometimes shaking from PTSD, but his face peaceful when the music flowed. Lisa Chen, the medic, who had been homeless, now had stable housing and was teaching other veterans about music therapy techniques she'd learned. And there were new people. Young veterans from Iraq and Syria, older veterans from Vietnam. Men and women of all races and backgrounds, finding community and healing through creative expression. Emma Mitchell sat in the front row, her violin across her lap. At 13, she had grown taller, and more confident. The scholarship fund in her mother's name had not only paid for summer music programs, but had also connected her with mentors at Juilliard, where she was now taking pre-college classes on weekends. Dylan Sterling was here too, a regular volunteer who was learning piano seriously, now not as an obligation, but as a passion. He and Emma had become friends, an unlikely pairing that worked because both understood what it meant to have music in your bones. Robert Sterling attended occasionally, sitting quietly in the back, watching this program he had funded, but that James had built. The billionaire had undergone his own transformation. He was still CEO of Tech Vision, still wealthy and powerful, but something had softened in him. He remembered his mother's lessons now. He saw people. Today was special. It was the 6-year anniversary of Sarah Mitchell's death. James had decided to honor her memory not with grief alone, but with celebration, with music. My wife Sarah believed that music could heal, James told the assembled group. She worked with veterans at the VA hospital, and she would always tell them that it was okay to not be okay, but that there were tools to help. Creative expression was one of those tools. He walked to the piano that Sterling had donated to the center, a beautiful upright that wasn't quite a Steinway grand, but was more than sufficient for their needs. Today, I want to play something for you. For Sarah, for my daughter Emma, for every person in this room who has faced loss and chosen to keep living anyway. He sat down at the piano and began to play. Not Chopin this time, but something else. An improvisation pulling from various classical themes, but weaving them into something new. Something that was uniquely his. The music spoke of struggle and survival, of war and peace, of death and life, of the long journey from brokenness to wholeness, a journey that never fully completes, but that creates beauty in its incompleteness. As he played, James looked around the room, at these veterans who had served their country and come home carrying invisible wounds, at his daughter, whose talent and spirit reminded him every day what love creates, at Dylan, who had learned that privilege comes with responsibility, at the empty chair where he imagined Sarah sitting smiling proud of the man he had become and the community he had built. The music swelled and filled the space. Some people closed their eyes. Others swayed gently. A few cried, but they were not tears of despair. They were tears of recognition, of being seen and understood, of finding a place where their experiences mattered and their contributions were valued. When James finished, the silence that followed was not awkward, but sacred. Then Tommy Rodriguez started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. Not the applause of a concert hall, but the appreciation of a community acknowledging one of their own. "That was beautiful, Dad," Emma said, her eyes shining. "Your mom would have loved this," James told her. "This room, these people, this community." She believed in the power of art to heal. We're proving her right. Robert Sterling approached after the gathering began to break up. "The Foundation Board wants to expand the program, open centers in 3 more cities. Would you be willing to help train other directors?" James considered. 6 months ago, he had been invisible. Now he was being asked to share his vision on a larger scale. "I think so. As long as we keep the focus on the people, not the programs. This only works because it's authentic, because the veterans know that I understand what they've been through. We need to make sure any expansion maintains that authenticity." "Agreed," Sterling said. "You'll have full control over that. We provide the resources. You provide the vision and integrity." They shook hands, but it was more than a business agreement. It was a partnership between two men who had learned important lessons from each other. Sterling had learned humility and humanity. James had learned that his gifts could serve a purpose beyond his own survival. As the community center emptied and James prepared to take Emma home, Dylan approached with his phone. "I want to show you something," the teenager said. He pulled up a video. It was the performance from 6 months ago. Someone had edited it beautifully, adding subtitles explaining who James was and the story behind the music. The video had been shared thousands of times, but Sterling had kept it within a controlled space, not allowing it to become viral spectacle. Instead, it had been shown at fundraisers and veteran organizations, always with context and respect. "People have been asking if you'd ever perform publicly," Dylan said. "Like a real concert. Would you want to?" James watched himself play on the small screen. He barely recognized the man in the janitor's uniform sitting at that expensive piano in that luxury penthouse. So much had changed since that night. "Maybe someday," he said. "But right now, this is enough. This room, these veterans, this community. This is where I'm meant to be." Emma took her father's hand. "Can we stop by the church on the way home? I want to play something for Mom." James felt his heart swell. "Of course, sweetheart." They walked out into the bright afternoon, father and daughter, both carrying instruments that had once been sources of pain, but now were tools of healing and connection. Behind them, the community center buzzed with the sound of veterans talking and laughing and planning next week's session. James Mitchell had started that fateful evening 6 months ago as a man invisible to the world. He ended it, seen, recognized, valued. But more importantly, he had rediscovered himself. The artist who lived inside the janitor. The father who found strength in vulnerability. The veteran who understood that survival was not enough. You had to find meaning in the survival. And the man who learned that it's never too late to raise your hand to say yes, to step into the light and share your gifts with the world, no matter how much time has passed or how much pain you've endured. The music doesn't forget. It waits. And when you're ready, it welcomes you home. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones hiding in plain sight. James Mitchell spent 5 years as invisible as the floors he cleaned and the trash he emptied. But inside that gray uniform was an artist, a veteran, a father, a man with extraordinary gifts, and a story that could move hearts. How many people do you pass every day without really seeing the barista who makes your coffee? The security guard who nods hello? The delivery driver who brings your packages? The custodian who keeps your building clean? Each of them has a story. Each of them has depths you can't imagine from a glance. What if we lived as if everyone we met was extraordinary? What if we assumed that the person serving us might be a genius, a poet, a musician, an artist? What if we treated every interaction as a chance to recognize someone's full humanity? James's story teaches us that dignity is inherent, not earned. That your job doesn't define your worth. That it's never too late to step into your gifts, no matter how long you've been hiding them. That grief and beauty can coexist. That saying yes, even when you're terrified, can change everything. If you've been moved by this story, maybe it's time to ask yourself some questions. What gifts have you been hiding? What parts of yourself have you locked away because they didn't seem practical or profitable? What would happen if you raised your hand, stepped forward, and let yourself be seen? Or maybe the question is different. Who have you been looking through? Who have you treated as invisible? What assumptions have you made about people based on their uniforms, or their positions, or their circumstances? The Veterans Creative Arts program that James Mitchell directs is real. Programs like it exist in communities across the country, offering healing and hope to men and women who served their country and came home carrying wounds we can't always see. They need support. They need funding. They need people who understand that creative expression is not a luxury, but a lifeline. If you're a veteran struggling with transition to civilian life, know that there are resources available. Communities of people who understand what you've been through. Programs that recognize that healing takes many forms, including artistic expression. If you're a parent raising a child with talent, know that there are scholarships and programs designed to help even when money is tight. Don't let your circumstances convince you that opportunities are impossible. James couldn't afford to give Emma what she needed, but by raising his hand and sharing his gifts, he created pathways he never imagined. If you're someone who has experienced profound loss, who has put away the things you love because they hurt too much to face, know that healing is possible. That the joy doesn't erase the pain, but it can exist alongside it. That returning to what you love might be the very thing that saves you. And if you're someone with resources and power, someone like Robert Sterling before his transformation, consider this a challenge. Look around at the people who make your life possible. The ones who clean your spaces, serve your food, deliver your packages, maintain your buildings. Learn their names. Ask about their lives. Recognize that they are not roles, but human beings with full, complex, extraordinary stories. You might discover that the janitor is a genius. The maid is a poet. The security guard is a philosopher. The person you've been looking through might be the person who changes your life. James Mitchell played Chopin's first ballade in a billionaire's penthouse and transformed not just his own life, but an entire community. He did it by saying yes, by being brave enough to be seen, by trusting that his gifts mattered even after years of silence. What would happen if you said yes? If you stepped forward? If you let yourself be seen? The music is waiting. Your gifts are waiting. The world is waiting for what only you can offer. Raise your hand. Share your story. Play your piece. Because somewhere in this vast, complicated world, someone needs to hear what you have to say. Someone needs to know that transformation is possible, that dignity is inherent, that it's never too late to be seen, never too late to be heard, never too late to come home to yourself. The stage is yours. Will you step forward,